With destructuring, we are not limited to only pulling properties off of objects. We can also destructure out of arrays as well. So let's check this out. I'm going to create an array that represents an array of different tech companies. So maybe we'll have something like companies, and it'll be an array. And inside of here, we'll have, maybe Google, Facebook, and Uber. So just a couple different tech companies. If destructuring objects was all about pulling off of properties, then destructuring of arrays is all about pulling off individual elements. All right, so that's the idea here. With destructuring objects, we pull off properties. When we destructure arrays, we pull off individual elements. So let's see what it looks like in practice. I might say const name is coming from companies, and then I can make reference to name, and sure enough, it's the first result on here, Google. So the rule behind destructuring array is that the order of, or basically the place in which we place the variable in here is the order in which we pull it out of the array. So the first element that I'm going to get back is going to be Google. If I add in another one, so maybe name2, that's going to pull off Facebook. And then name3 is going to pull off Uber. And I don't need a semicolon. There we go. If I continue to pull off more properties, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I can pull off name4. And I keep on putting a semicolon there, my mistake. And then I put in name4. Let's do a type of, and you'll see that there's absolutely nothing wrong with trying to access name4. It's just going to return undefined. So if I try to reach outside the bounds of the array, that's totally fine. We're just going to get undefined. It will not throw an error. Okay. So the reason that this is so useful right now is I can't tell you how many times I end up with code that looks something like, so let's take out all these extra ones right here. I can't tell you the number of times I've done something like const first company equals companies at 0. And there's nothing bad about this approach right here to get access to the first one, but accessing the first element array like this, I don't know, it's a personal preference thing, but I feel like it just looks a little bit rough. By using destructuring out of an array, it just gives me a little bit, it's a little bit more clear what I'm doing here. I'm accessing the first element out of the array. Maybe it's an acquired taste, I don't know, but over time I've come to really prefer this type of syntax right here as opposed to the square braces with 0 in here as well. One more thing that I want to point out in more detail is just the fact that when we're destructuring from an array, we're going to use the square braces as opposed to the curly braces that we did with an object. So if I used curly braces on the array, like so, it's going to literally try to pull the property name off of the array companies. And so this array right here doesn't have a name property, but it will have a length, right? So we could pull off the length, and then sure enough, that's 3. So to destructure a property, we use the curly braces. To destructure an element, we use the square braces instead. So there's one more thing here that we might want to know about with destructuring of arrays, and this goes back to the use of the spread operator. So when we were talking about the spread operator, or in the rest one, the ... in the last section, it was still kind of hard to see where we'd use that too often. And so actually, we can use that spread operator with destructuring as well. So maybe I pull off the name of the first company, and if I want to get a reference to all the other companies in here as well, I can do ... rest, and now rest is the rest of the companies in that array, besides just the first one. And this can be used as much as possible. So if I do name2, now I've got name2, and then the last entry, or the rest of them, is everything else that is inside that array. So just like Uber right here. This approach right here, this is another thing that is fantastically useful for whiteboarding interviews. There's a lot of questions where it's kind of like, something revolving around, give me something at place X inside of an array. And so by taking this approach right here, you end up with something that's a little bit nicer than doing like, companies at 1. I feel like I would prefer to see code that looks a little bit like this as opposed to something like, companies at 1, like so. All right, so let's continue in the next section and talk about mixing destructuring methods of arrays and objects together.